Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Nate Schoemer, and you're watching my show on dog training, where I sit down with world class trainers, behavior specialists, authors, and educators from the world of dogs. Today's guest is Bill Church, also known as Bow Wow Bill. Bill's passion for dogs started at just 8 years old, sparking a lifelong commitment to understanding canine behavior and helping people become better dog stewards. With a strong foundation in canine psychology, Bill's training methods focus on clear communication, trust, and mutual respect. His gentle yet effective approach has been featured on television and delivers lasting results with pet dogs, service animals, and working companions. A graduate of the Keeler System and NePoPo Gold Program, Bill has also certified others in the NePoPo training system. Whether teaching basic manners or solving complex behavioral issues, Bill is dedicated to building strong, balanced relationships between dogs and their families. Bow Wow Bill, welcome to the show.
Hey, Nate. Thank you very much, man. It's great to be here. It's an honor.
Well, it's an honor to have you on here. I appreciate you taking the time. I know we've done a few live Q&As and live interviews on your channel, so it's nice to finally get you on my channel and my show. And let's start off with telling my viewers a little bit about your journey in dog training before we start diving deep into the world of NePoPo and how you've been able to use it in order to get really amazing, incredible results with pet dogs and even service dogs, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's right. Yeah, thank you again. It's cool to be on the other side. I do interviews like this as well on my Bow Wow Build channel, and I always love speaking with you. I started out as a young child. Well, first off, I come from a family of 13 girls. I'm the only boy. And so I was always looking for a friend, a companion. And when I was 8 years old, I received my first dog, and I took him through some training. It was a golden retriever, and I fell in love with it, man. I fell in love with it, and was asked by the instructor to start helping with the classes. And so I started as a little assistant, and then it just kind of grew from there. I drifted away and I went to college. I moved down to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then up here to Seattle, Washington. And I just was kind of feeling a little bit unfulfilled with life. And I thought back when I was really happy, and it was working with dogs. And I actually watched a Cesar Millan video on National Geographic when Caesar was just starting out, and I was like, oh man, if this guy can do it, I can do it. And so I started out as a dog walker and training dogs, helping people out just to get my foot in the industry. And that was back in 2007. And then I started marketing to veterinarians and working with a lot of dogs. And through my journey of dog training, I started out when I was older. I was primarily a purely positive dog trainer, and I ran into some problems with that. I understand because it felt good, and I wanted to do everything I could to help these dogs, but I would run into cases where the training just wouldn't stick and wouldn't be effective. And I just remember saying to myself, this should work, but it's not working. And so that started my journey on learning more, as much as I could. And I'm still learning, man. One thing to remember is that there's no finish line to figuring this stuff out, man. I recommend everybody always keep their mind open and learn from those who produce spectacular dogs. And so I went to some dog training conferences, and I remember back in 2010, I went down to Austin, Texas at the International Association of Canine Professionals event. And I met some wonderful dogs, and that's what really began my journey of learning. Is I would watch these dogs perform, and I would kind of follow the dogs to the handler and ask him, what are you doing? Because this is amazing. This is what I want, not just from my own personal dogs, but to help my clients as much as I can. And so that's how it started, Nate, is going to these conferences, meeting and networking. And I love people. And so I love to learn and love to get to know them and find out ways that I can glean knowledge from others, pearls of wisdom that I can apply and have a better more effective communication style with the dogs that I work with. And so I think the proof is in the pudding, though, right? You want to look at the people, and but more importantly, you want to look at the dogs that they're producing, and making sure that they're happy and very, very willing to not just be a companion, but to listen to the human counterpart as well, to have a harmonious relationship.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I was bit by the bug a long time ago and haven't stopped the learning journey, but it's also a lot of fun teaching. And just like you, I'm constantly learning. I mean, I'm a member on Michael Ellis's online membership. I'm still studying Nino from STS Canine. Um, One of my friends recently started the NePoPo silver course, I believe, which that's on my list to study as well, including training without conflict, Ivan's course. There's so much, and it's so valuable to learn as much as you can about dog training if you're really trying to be an expert within this field. We can take dog training and we can simplify it to teach most of our clients the crucial 20% to get 80% of the results. But us as dog trainers, we should try to get as close to 100% as possible, though it will never be reached. It's the journey and the strive towards that which is so valuable. And I think it's really good that you started with Pure Positive. And I think most people should start with Pure Positive because we can finesse our timing. We can get comfortable with handling and working with different dogs. And of course, less extreme cases, but just getting your hands on lots of dogs and getting good at that timing. Because that timing and that skill set is going to transfer over when we do start to use things like negative reinforcement with leash pressure or low level stim or implementing positive punishment. Because, of course, as you know, if somebody starts implementing positive punishment too soon and their timing isn't good and their understanding of reading dogs' body language isn't where it should be, and they're correcting things that they shouldn't be correcting, then we can start getting some of those issues that we see of dogs that look nervous or fearful or worried when they're around their handler because they didn't set up the training in a way that gave the dog this sense of predictability or certainty or some kind of control. So I think starting with Pure Positive probably helped set you on a really solid path to where when you started using other techniques, your timing was probably already very good. And so you had really nice results. I was on the opposite side where I started learning initially with traditional style training, and my timing wasn't good. And it caused frustration in me and the dogs because
Mm.
the dogs weren't learning and I had no frame of reference. So I couldn't compare to other dogs to determine if I was doing it right. And the learning curve was pretty extreme because of that. And I wish I had started on Pure Positive techniques. But let's get started with the NePoPo, because that's really what I want to talk to you about. You've been through all the NePoPo training programs and you even taught NePoPo, correct?
Correct. Yep. I went back so there's silver school, then there's gold school, and then there's the teachers are known as golden multiplicators, and then they can, once you've reached the golden multiplicator status, and you can actually train and certified trainers that have previously passed the silver school. So you can take a silver student and bring them up to gold if you're a gold multiplicator. And the cool thing is that there's so many different disciplines of as far as what methodologies, or excuse me, what avenue of training that they do. So there's protection work, there's pet dogs like me, hunting, all that stuff is out there. As far as the trainer that you are, you can tailor the gold to what you're looking for as far as a silver student.
And for those that are not familiar with and is it pronounced NePoPo or NePoPo? I've heard both.
NePoPo.
NePoPo.
Right.
So for those that are not familiar with what it is, can you explain a little bit perhaps about the system?
Sure. So NePoPo was a system developed by Michael and Bart Bellin, right? And it basically is a system that gets the dog to do on cue every time with heart and soul, right? And the examples that I can think of is, how your dog will come up to you when they're hungry and they have their metal bowl in their mouth, and they're looking at you with fire in their eyes, just wanting something from you, right? And but then when you go and tell the dog to fetch something, they look at you like what are you talking about, right? And so or the dog is pulling you on a leash, is on a trail, or wanting to sniff a tree, or some pee or something that's over there that's interesting them, and they're pulling as hard as they can. But when you go and tell them to track something, right, or use that nose for something that you want to utilize that purpose for, they're not into it at all, right? And so that's basically it, is using and understanding the operant and classical conditioning, understanding the quadrants, how to use this, and when it is necessary to to bring about a correction to a dog, and to how that's done, and preparing the animal. And so when the inevitable correction does come, that it doesn't shut down that dog, it doesn't make them nervous or anxious, that they've actually have a good understanding based on learning from you, that and also you learning from the dog as well through the different phases of behavioral understanding, that the dog is ready. And so and every single time, man, and it's amazing. And like I said earlier about watching the dogs and following the dog up the chain to the owner, I first saw, actually I met Bart at a IACP event, and watching him work with humans, and doing the same type of NePoPo training, it worked with any behavior. And so
With
they don't.
with the people, like he was using that
Yes.
sort of interesting.
Yes. Yep. It had $100 bill, and he was challenging the people to go get it, but then he would call them back, and all the like. That's what's cool about the actual, especially the gold level, right? Is a lot of role playing stuff, and that helps you understand. And I'm always preaching, Nate, that instead of anthropomorphizing the dog, which I see is the biggest mistake that dog owners make, is they put human characteristics on the animal, instead of looking through the dogs by proxy through their eyes, seeing the world how they might see it. And so when we do the role play games, it actually puts you in the position of the dog. And then when we start to do the different aspects of training, positive only, or how our timing's off or something like that, we can actually see the frustration that's built with us, and then we can understand our dogs better. And so that's one of the things that I love, especially about the gold aspect of the school and the learning, is the role playing. And the beautiful thing about the silver, and dude, I wish they had silver school back when I was a new trainer. And so this is something I definitely recommend. The beautiful thing about the silver school is that it teaches the various aspects of basically the quadrants, right? So when we say positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment, those are the quadrants that behavior that were Thorndike and Skinner kind of coined way back, I believe in the, what was it, 30s. And so they explain every single quadrant, and they tell you the advantages and disadvantages of using each. And they give you a wonderful wireframe of how to take and just understand how behavior works. And the other thing that I love about it is that they don't say this one is the only way to do it. They explain all of it, and they invite you, based on your situation and the dogs you're learning with, to use whatever aspect with full understanding of the advantages and disadvantages of whichever route you choose to go.
I think that's very important. I think teaching the science behind techniques. There are trainers out there that don't care about the science, but I'm definitely one of the advocates for it, because I'm a true believer that if we can understand the science and what's happening beneath the surface, then even though we may not know everything about dog training, or maybe we haven't dealt with certain cases or certain training goals, by having a deep understanding of how dogs learn, how they process information, and what is going on beneath the surface, it gives us additional tools to be able to problem solve and tell ourselves, is this following the science? And if it is, this could be a technique that could teach the dog the behavior, or it could help us work through a behavioral issue. And it's one of the reasons why I've always been drawn to Michael Ellis and the way that he teaches. And as I said, the NePoPo system is on my radar, and I do plan on doing it in the future because I like to also hear different ways in which people explain things. My buddy that I told you about, who recently started the Silver program, the online version, he sent me a message and he says, I don't understand this. And it was one of the ways in which they were defining classical conditioning. And I think it was something like, we say dog does. And he says, that's not how I learned classical conditioning to be. And I said, well, there's a lot more to classical conditioning than what most people see. It's not just I make a click and I give a dog a treat and they salivate when they hear the click. Dogs are being classically conditioned all the time.
Yes.
And when we first start teaching a dog a behavior, we're using those 4 quadrants. But on a long enough timeline, I'm a true believer that a dog's response to a command, when done the right way, with the right amount of reps and the right amount of influence and motivation, as you were saying, using a lot of motivation to manipulate behaviors and understanding the reasoning behind it, we can get a dog to respond to a command through a classically conditioned response. Meaning,
Yes.
we say down and the dog goes into it automatically based on classical conditioning, which is a very powerful response, because now it is almost as if the dog is doing it because of its classical conditioning. And we often say a classically conditioned response is an involuntary response. The dog is not choosing to salivate. It's involuntary. The dog is not choosing to become anxious when you grab your keys and you're getting ready to leave. If the dog has separation anxiety issues, those behaviors are involuntary. And to have a dog perform commands in the same manner through that understanding of classical conditioning, I think is underrated because it's very powerful and can do really great things. Would you agree with all that?
Yes, absolutely. It becomes reflexive, right? And so now we're starting to get into Pavlov, right? And so
Mhm.
Pavlov is more the classical where Skinner leans towards the operant.
Mhm.
And if we think about Pavlov, the ringing of the bell and the salivating dog, something, an unconditioned stimulus, becomes, and then it's a unconditioned response, and then we turn that into a conditioned
Mhm.
stimulus, right? And then we turn that into a conditioned response, and then we do it so the conditioned response actually becomes reflexive. And so that's the key, is to I tell my clients, repetition is the mother of learning. And that's the other thing about NePoPo too, is like, look, you're going to have to study this stuff and do it over and over and over again. And I've gone to multiple classes, and every single time I learned something else, man. And so it's like, it's not just a one and done. And I've heard that too from some of my shadow students that have attended the online silver school, so that you can go to an online silver school, or I believe once a year now. The next in-person silver school is in Springfield, Missouri, and that's going to be in October. I actually recommend people to go to the in-person school. It's a little bit more money, and it's a little bit more. You have to travel. Some people, I'm from Seattle, to travel to Missouri, so it's a pretty big commitment, but it's worth it, because not only do you get to learn in person from Michael and Bart Bellin, but you also get to kind of struggle with the other students and go to study groups and go through this stuff over and over. And then the gold multiplicators are there as well, to help out. And so there's a couple of different ways of learning this. And then we talk about, operant conditioning, and where we start to set up a scenario where the dog explores, and then we talk about shaping and charging and using a clicker, right? And we learn all that stuff too, about how we implement all these things, to get the dog to find their advantage, to bring about hope. What we call hope is huge. and in that animal, and how to start to recognize when an operantly conditioned response starts to become classically
Mhm.
conditioned, right? So we can start to name it and start to put a cue to that response where the dog thinks it's their idea. And I like the operant. Uh, what I compare it to is I'm a glass artist, and I compare it to making the dog the artist, right? Where they explore and they start to offer different behaviors, and then we can reward based on what we see in that dog at that time.
And there was a lot there. One, I agree with, if you want to become a professional trainer or you are a professional trainer and you can go to a school, that's always going to be the best. Being around a group of like-minded people that have also been bit by the bug, that are obsessed, that's the best way to do it if you can afford it and you can commit the time. But if you're not able to go to a location, doing the online is a great way to go as well. And for those that are doing that, what I always recommend when people reach out to me, if you're doing an online course, whether it's this one or it's any Michael Ellis or Training Without Conflict, you're doing all of them. I think that would be great. One right after the next, become a very well rounded trainer. Go on Nextdoor, go on Facebook community and make a post and say you're looking for someone who is also interested in becoming a dog trainer, or they are a dog trainer and they want to learn more and have a training partner. Find that connection and then go through the program together. So you're still working with some like-minded people, but you're learning through a online platform from some of the best people in the world. And that's a really effective way to learn. And then there's something you said that I want to touch on a little bit more. You were talking about hope. Now, when you say hope, how does that relate to dog training and what do you mean specifically by it?
Well, hope it just shows that the dog is has motivation to do, right? And it's something that is essential, especially the one thing that I love that Michael Bellin brings about to the NePoPo is she brings about the relationship aspect and building the relationship with that dog. And it's kind of a merging between the sport world and the pet world, right? Where the relationship is key, but it's also sometimes the relationship becomes a little bit, I think, misinterpreted. Like
Or
we were talking
overlooked,
about.
perhaps?
Say that again.
Or overlooked, perhaps?
Yeah, or overlooked, right? And that's where I see it in the sport dog world too. Is like sometimes the relationship might be overlooked, right? And even in the pet dog world, mislabeling things based on the information that the dog is presenting, and anthropomorphication that the human being is doing. And so it's good to have that hope. And so the dog is always trying, it boils down to that motivation of that animal, right? And so when we don't have hope, then we have a shut down dog. And one of
Mhm.
the things that I saw is I saw a video that Bart posted, and that the thing is that the dog, the tail was up, the ears are up, the eyes are just on fire, and you can tell that this dog really really likes what they're doing. And if I can structure a training regimen that lets that dog, just keeps that dog fulfilled and happy, that's what I'm talking about.
And
Is
the possibility of achieving success through the dog's eyes, which could be getting access to the toy, playing tug, getting a treat. It's the analogy that's commonly used when we start randomizing rewards is that slot machine analogy. You know, right?
That's right.
Every time you pull the slot, you're not going to win, but there is the possibility of winning. You would never play a slot machine that never allowed any sort of pull to win. If there was no winning, what's the point of playing? So I think that's great. And there was something else I wanted to mention too about what we said earlier. I just forgot when I was talking, was the online. So these online courses that we are talking about that are available from some of these top dog trainers in the world, it's not just for professional trainers or for working dog trainers or sport dog trainers. This also could be a tool that's very useful, even if you have a family pet, but you're really passionate and you like being able to communicate well with your dog and you want to enhance your dog's quality of life and you want to do things that's going to overall improve that dog's experiences here with us in our homes. Doing these online courses are also great for people like that, because one of the main reasons why we're talking is I'm very interested in how you've been able to take something that a lot of people perceive as, oh, that system's just for working dogs or for dog trainers, and you've been able to take it and use it very successfully within your pet training. So it is transferable. People often think that too with, let's use Ivan, training without conflict. Oh, he just does sport dogs. It's like, you give Ivan any dog with any behavioral issue, any obedience goals. If someone's going to be able to do it, he's one of the trainers that's going to be able to do it. And having that deep understanding, you can deal with behavioral issues and you can deal with obedience issues. In fact, I was listening to a lecture delivered by Michael Ellis on behavioral issues, and he said something that I've always thought myself, and it was nice to hear someone else with his level of expertise and reputation to say, for a long time I resisted having a class on behavioral issues because I feel like it's all connected. If you understand training and you can train a dog, the principles that apply in training and teaching behaviors are also the same principles that apply for behavioral issues. And one of the biggest mistakes people make is they want to go directly to the behavioral issue, where often that could be fixed just by enhancing the relationship, building a communication system, and building motivation and understanding in different areas. Then suddenly things that were a big problem have now quickly become issues of the past. And we didn't even have to address it directly. It was fixed as a byproduct of building the relationship. And so do you have anything you want to add to that? Or are you ready for my next question about NePoPo or NePoPo?
I absolutely want to add to that. I think that addressing the behavior a lot of times is just striking at the leaves where we want to get to the root of the problem, right? Which is an overall fundamental understanding of the dog, the relationship. And so that's where it's important to have a good foundation, an eclectic knowledge base, right? And Martin Michael will tell you too, like, don't just learn from us, like learn from as many people as you can. But now you have the framework to understand more in depth what they're talking about. And, and even like KMODT, which is a Keeler method of dog training, I've gone through that school as well. And whenever I would teach a class, people would come on the very first day wanting problem behavior solved. And I would always tell them, look, let's get to week number 7. That is the problem behavior. That is where we address everything. If you have a problem, then we're going to address it there. And guess what happens at week number 7?
They don't have the issue anymore.
That's exactly right, dude. And so you're right. It's like once we start to lay down a good foundation, a good understanding, and proper communication, then a lot of these problems are resolved, because sometimes these problems are pent up frustration that the dog is trying to communicate, and the dog has gained the advantage through a different behavior that isn't conducive to the human relationship or the human life that we want help with, right? And that's why we've reached in our pocket, pulled out our hard-earned money, and hired a professional to help us. And that's where we'll get into how I've used NePoPo to help me with the pet world.
Yeah, and with behavioral issues too, what's really important is proper diagnosis. So if we think about aggression, for example, there are so many different forms of aggression. And if we rush into it and we address it as if it's one type of aggression, but it's actually a different type, the techniques that we can use to help deal with these issues could be complete opposite of one another, depending on why the dog's acting a certain way. Yes. So proper diagnosis, and if we rush into things, we may miss that. If we don't pay attention to what our dogs are telling us, because they're telling us things all the time through body language, then we're going to miss this information. So just as much we want our dogs to understand us, we need to pay attention to their body language. And a lot of times I think we can learn body language pretty well just through observation. Just watch them. And a lot of the emotions that humans have, dogs have. And you were talking about being anthropomorphic earlier. I tell people that being anthropomorphic can be very bad in certain ways, But then other ways, there are a lot of similarities. For example, dogs
Totally.
can become excited with anticipation of going on a walk. Dogs can be disappointed. I've had situations where my dogs think they're getting ready to go with me somewhere, but they're not. They're staying at the house. And I'm like, all right, see you, pups. And the look on their face are like, oh, I thought I was going. That's a sense or a feeling of disappointment. And I know that it used to be, I don't know, maybe 70 years ago, or maybe more or less, they didn't even consider animals having emotions. And of course, now we know they have a lot of emotions. Touching on being anthropomorphic, what are some of the ways that you've seen people being anthropomorphic in ways that are very bad and could be harmful to the relationship or the dog's overall experience on a psychological level?
When they mislabel, well, first off, let me define anthropomorphism. So anthropomorphism is laying those human characteristics,
Mm,
right? And I
yeah.
totally get it, like, because that's how we see the world. And so it makes sense to understand something a little bit more simply to overlay our own perceptions upon that. But that's just not how it works. We as human beings have a totally different brain structure. And
Mhm.
and just like you're saying, like, we have these we have same characteristics, just like physical bodies. We have the same attributes. We all have a skeletal system,
Mm,
a circulatory system, digestive tract,
mm,
neurological system, and the headquarters of that neurological system is our brain. But then when we start to look at the animal brain versus a human brain, the the animal brain that we're working with has stops at the limbic system, where we have a prefrontal cortex. Now a dog, where we're starting to realize now, and with technology that's available to us, and fMRIs and different things where we're actually taking brain scans of these animals, is that the dogs do have a little bit of a frontal lobe, a prefrontal cortex. And so that we ours is much larger and allows us so many more capabilities with our thought process, where we can kind of time travel in our mind. We can go back in the past, like when you and I did a talk. And while I'm thinking about it, speaking of the Silver School, online Silver School, I did a interview with the whole NePoPo team before the launch of the Silver School. So if you check out my channel, Bow Wow Bill, and search Silver School NePoPo team, you'll see them, how they built it, and they put a lot of work into this school. But to go back to the anthropomorphizing, people mislabel attributes that the dog is exhibiting
mhm,
and making excuses for it, right? And so I see them when a dog is, barking crazy. Oh, this dog is just, oh, this dog is just a cantankerous old dog, which it can be, but they don't realize that it might be a fear-based, an alarm barking, right? And that we can take steps to help alleviate that fear, take that dog from the threshold where they're in overwhelm, and put them in a spot where they can actually discern and make a different decision on how they act. um Jiminy Christmas, there's so many of them, like, just
Yeah.
like how my little—
Seen if you don't
what's that?
Sorry, go ahead. I was gonna say a big one I've seen is a dog doing something when the owner wasn't home. And then when they come home, they, 1, reprimand the dog for it, which is too late, but 2, they will put human thought processes like, "Oh, my dog ripped up the pillow because my dog was mad at me." More
Yep.
likely than not, the dog was bored and ripping up the pillow was entertaining.
Yep.
Or another common one that I see is, especially if there's multiple dogs, they something happens, they rip up the trash. People post videos like this all the time on YouTube Shorts and TikTok and whatnot. And they'll show the trash and then they'll show the two dogs and they'll say which one's guilty, and one will appear to be more guilty. But that doesn't necessarily mean that was the dog. That could just be a dog who's trying to calm the human by using appeasement gestures like, hey, everything's cool, everything's all right. They know that the human's upset, but they don't know exactly why. And they're hoping by doing this appeasement, it's going. I use the example of the person at the bar. There's about to be a fight, and you have the one person who goes, hey, hey, everybody, calm down. Let's grab a beer and have a good time. That's the same thing as the dog that's doing more of these appeasement gestures, where it doesn't mean that the dog's guilty. And of course, there's even worse ones where um, I've seen it before where a dog will perform well, and so they'll give the dog a steak afterwards, but then the dog won't perform well, and they're like, "You're not eating for a few days," or something like that. And these are things like the dog isn't able to connect that, and so those are some of the worst ones I've seen. I'm sure
Yeah.
you've seen other ones similar or even worse than that, right?
Yeah, well, even the fish, there's a fish laying there, and the dog's flipping water on the fish, and they don't realize that it's a burial type of behavior for that dog. They think that I've heard that the dog's trying to save the fish or something like that.
Ah,
You're right, and it's just like it's just an example, and just like you were saying, Nate, like I hear my clients say, like, "Oh, he knows he did wrong,"
yes,
right?
that's a good one.
Right, and just think of your analogy about the person that's actually the peacekeeper that's offering appeasement. Now imagine that the person is like, "Hey guys, let's chill out," and then all of the frustration and violence is now directed to that person, right?
Mhm.
Or and so and how does that feel? Like we know as human beings that this person is trying to mitigate and to bring peace about to the situation, and so we've done the opposite of what we should do.
Yes.
And that's what I try to explain to my clients is like by correcting this dog that's appeasing, we're actually kind of doing something that doesn't feel good if we were to do that to another person, and it brings about distrust.
And
It brings
confusion.
and uncertainty, right? Confusion. And it's where the dog's like, dude, I tried to communicate. And that's what it boils down to is the dog's trying to communicate all the time.
Mhm.
And the misinterpretation, the mislabeling, um, and so that's where it's important to essentially become the dog, right?
Yeah, I
And
love the, role playing stuff that you mentioned earlier, and that's
yeah,
something where I've always seen with people who are learning how to train either their own dog or they're learning to become a dog trainer, by doing any sort of role playing and putting yourself in the position of the dog and trying to understand their perspective, it's one of the best ways to learn. And sometimes I'll feel as though I'm explaining what I'm trying to teach someone very well, and I can tell by looking at them that they're not getting it. And so then I'll put them in the dog's position and I'll do the exact same thing and they get it right away. Like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Okay. And that's
yeah,
a very, very effective way of learning. So I do like that they implement and do that at the school. And the other question that I had to lead from that into more about the NePoPo system, this isn't just a treat based system. There
no,
is a balance. It's a balanced approach, correct?
yeah, yeah.
And what's
So
the best way to define a balanced approach? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
no, I mean it's a balanced approach, but by they explain, if you I mean, it could be a treat-based system, but they explain why that might work and why that might not work when you go to the school, right? What the advantages of just using a treat-based system, right? Purely positive. And then here's the advantages of not using it. The dog becomes full really quickly. And now what do we do? Right? There's no way to reprimand when the behavior is exhibited that we want to stop, right? And so, um, and another way, especially in the gold schools with the role playing, another way that I kind of get a better understanding of my pet dog clients, and it's important. One thing to remember too is that when we go to the NePoPo school, when we go to other schools, especially in the pet dog world, your clients aren't interested in hearing a lot of this stuff. Like a lot of it just goes over their head. This is something that we're passionate about, but what they want to know is how to fix a problem that they've hired you for. And just like we were talking about, sometimes the problem can be symptomatic of the overall dysfunction in the relationship. But now, with a proper understanding of NePoPo, you see how the dog got into this situation where these people are using NePoPo inadvertently. And I think it was you, Nate, that talked to me about a gentleman with a German Shepherd, and he brought him out, and the dog's just going nuts, right? And was this you? And then you're like, "Oh,
Oh
it
no,
looks great.
remind me.
It looks great." And he's like, "How do I stop that?" Is that
I think this was someone else, but fill me in
okay?
on the story.
Okay. Well, so this guy brings out this dog. Now I can't remember who it was exactly. And the dog trainer's looking at him, and the dog's just going nuts at the dog trainer. And it brings him out of his crate, and then it puts him up, and the dog trainer's like, "Dude, that looks great." And the client's just dumbfounded, be like, "Great, what? How do I stop that?" Right? And so, when we talk NePoPo, we talk about gasoline, we talk ignition, we talk about putting fire, putting passion, we're using that hope to motivate that animal to do on cue every time. But what happens is that a lot of times people inadvertently use NePoPo, like barking at the door, pulling on the leash, stuff like this. That is NePoPo. The dog pulls on the leash, so we have negative reinforcement, or excuse me, we have a stimulus, and the dog pulls to wherever they want. So they're sniffing a tree. The stimulus goes away, negative reinforcement. They get to sniff what they want, and then that's that reinforcing agent, a positive reinforcement as well, right? And so inadvertently, when you start to understand how this works, you realize that dogs find their advantage and get into the behavior, which becomes the reward. And I often tell people, in the sport dog world, we're telling dogs to go, go, go. And in the pet dog world, it's just the opposite. We're telling dogs, stop, stop, stop. No, no, no. Right. And so you start to realize, and we were talking about that, the video about the slot machines, right? The power of intermittent rewards to bring about explosive behavior, good driving desire. And it's found in human beings. When we go to those slot machines, man, you see those people right? And it's because the intermittent reward, right? Where it could be, this next one could be the jackpot. I could, and they keep on striving for that. Where a lot of times in the pet dog world, we're looking for stability. We're looking for predictable behaviors, and they show you how to do that in the NePoPo school too. And that's the beauty about looking at the whole philosophy from a 30,000 foot view, and being able to explain every aspect and advantages and disadvantages of using every system. And they actually spend a day on each part. And so you get a thorough understanding. Another essential part is that they do written tests. And so, or they do, it's a test, it's a multiple answer. And one answer could be right. None of the answers could be right. All of the answers could be right. Two of the answers, like there's something, whatever applies to this. And then you have to have a passing grade to get through that school. And so that's the other aspect of this too, is like knowing how to utilize this and be able to implement it within pet dog world that is going to be effective with the clients that we have in solving the problems that they want, but also knowing how they got there in the first place. And so we can kind of backtrack to get where they want to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And what sort of tools specifically have you taken from NePoPo? In fact, what I think would be a fun exercise for us to do is to run through a make-believe situation. Now, with most of the training that you do a lot of stay and trains, correct?
No, not too many. I
Not
do
too many,
mostly, yeah,
mostly lessons then?
mostly private lessons at the house. I
Okay, cool.
rarely take a board and train, and the reason being is that I mean, it's just a big commitment,
It
right? This
is.
dog comes into my life, and just like you were saying about the dogs that show disappointment,
Right.
right? Like I bring a new dog in, and just like if I want to take a dog, sometimes I have multiple dogs in the house, and I go and pick one and take them, and I see the disappointment in the other dogs,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So they're like, "What,
Okay.
dude?" Um,
So, but you're doing one or two here and there, just not a large amount. So you're doing a lot of lessons then.
yep.
With your lessons, let's start with a very common situation where it's someone who has a nice friendly dog. There's no fear-based issues or aggression-based issues. They just want a dog that listens better. So the dog ignores their commands, won't follow the response. The dog kind of does what the dog wants to do. And again, there's no behavioral issues that they're really concerned about. Maybe the dog barks at a squirrel or something like that on a walk, but nothing really extreme. And so it's the very first day they want to build a better relationship. Again, the dog's friendly, so you can come into the house. You're not worried about the dog being aggressive and biting you in their territory. I don't know about you. When I deal with dogs that are human aggressive, I meet in a neutral environment to minimize the odds of me getting bit for safety purposes. So think about your happy-go-lucky golden retriever or Bernese Mountain Dog or whatever friendly dog. What is your standard approach for that when you're coming in and you're talking to the clients? And something you said earlier too was, and this is something you and I have talked about, it's really fun training trainers because dog trainers want to know the whole journey. They want to know all the pieces of the puzzle, where a lot of times, not always, but a lot of clients that have their family pet, they want the puzzle put together. They don't care about how you put it together. They want the results without the journey, but sometimes they do. Do you gauge that in the beginning? Do you say, how much do you want to know? I'll give you all the information, or let's go right to what you need to do. How do you approach it? How do you structure it?
It depends on the client, honestly. Right. And some of them, just like you said, are really, they want to know the nuts and bolts behind this. And some of them just want you to fix that problem. Right.
Do you
And so,
ask them in the beginning?
yeah, I mean, I also ask what they do for a living, right? If they're a technically minded person, if they're an engineer, if they're a therapist, if they work with behavior, then they might glean some of the nuts and bolts to apply to their practice. And that's the other thing that I can think of, man, is like, this isn't just for dog trainers, dude. Like, we've had people that go through the NePoPo Silver School with autistic kids. We've had them work with horses. It's behavior in general. Like, so even with people, we can utilize NePoPo philosophy for that too. So that's important to know. So if I have a therapist, yeah, absolutely, I'm going to get a little bit more into the technical jargon. But as a pet dog trainer, to get my clients to understand it, it's very important to have analogies. And so using analogies on how this dog got to where they are, and using like I like Buddy the Elf for those dogs that are just a little bit excited. They're great dogs, right? But just like I ask them, have you seen Elf? Buddy the Elf, Will Ferrell, where he's all in people's faces being super happy. And how does that make them feel, right?
Great movie, by the way.
Yeah, great movie. And so it's like that's it. It's like, look, your dog's not a bad dog. He's just a little bit much. And so we start to understand it fundamentally. And then how do we make changes? How do we bring about different things that we can celebrate with that dog so we can build their confidence in different avenues of expressing that type of behavior, right? And so I like the clicker. The clicker is a form of the operant conditioning where we click and release the dog to come get the food. I like training with food. I like the dog to come to me and to get the food. I also use a treat and train. Do you know what those are, Nate? The bowls that you hit the button. Doot.
I'm not familiar.
Oh, they're so cool, man. I'm going to have to show you a treat and train here pretty soon. But so, and so the dog is motivated by that food. They hear a cue that tells them, okay, cool, I get paid. It's very similar to that jackpot, right? Or a slot machine is like, it's not just like, oh, here's your money for the slot machine. What happens when you win the slot machine?
You get a reward.
But what happens, like, we get flashing lights, we get bells,
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, right. And so that means that's charged up, that slot machine is charged up when we're looking for that. When we pull it, and then nothing, pull the tab, nothing, pull the tab, ding, 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 ding. Oh, we're getting paid, right? And so it's the same type of principle of like, of tapping in and charging up that clicker. So now the dog understands that whenever I hear this noise, that I'm getting paid, man. Like it's time. My reward is here. Now,
what exactly does the NePoPo stand for? What does that mean? And how is some of that specifically used with the dog? And when is it introduced?
So it means negative, positive, positive. It has to do with the quadrants, and just like I was explaining with the leash pulling, right? It's something that is naturally inherent to that dog of like learning a behavior and bringing about the ability to endure through a little bit of a struggle to get to it, right? And so we can, with the leash, when we first train the dog, working with the puppy, you put a leash on them, and sometimes that dog is scared out of their mind or doing like they just don't like this, right? And so we start to introduce the leash in a very positive way, and we help that dog along. We help the dog understand what this is. And then once the dog has a baseline understanding and it shows us through their behavior that they're okay with this, then we can start to venture out, maybe walk down the driveway or something like that. And then the dog starts to get okay with that. And then we start to go out into the world. But what happens is the dog starts to realize exactly what this is and starts to, not have any concern with it. And then it starts to pull to get where it wants to go, right? And so even though that pulling brings about a lot of tension on the neck, it's discomfort for that animal. It's something that they are happy to endure because they know that there is a reward at the end of this. And so same thing we use with e-collars too, is we'll start to maybe use it at a low level and indicate to the dog that this new sensation is an indicator of, you could be getting paid. You could be getting something that you want, something that motivates you. And then as that dog starts to get tougher, right? And that's the other thing that I do with my clients, especially when I talk about toughness in a dog, right? Sometimes you can make your dog too tough, and that's another aspect of this that we don't want, right? And so toughness in a dog, one of the things that I see is a lot of discomfort around talking about toughness with my pet dog clients, right? Because they feel they're being mean. And so one of the things that I like to do with my clients is whenever I see some apprehension, or when I'm talking about working and training through a situation, and I want to get into their head a little bit, my client's head. And so I ask them, when I say the word toughness, I say, you're a director of a movie, and the movie calls for a scene that requires toughness. What explain the scene to me? Like, how do you see this playing out? And some of my clients are like, I'm in the back closet calling 911 because there's an axe murderer in my house, right? And I'm like, that's not at all what I'm saying to you. What
You
I'm
get a
saying,
bunch of different answers, I'm sure.
I do, but it gets me into their head, and like, how do you perceive this? How do you perceive this relationship? How do you perceive what I'm trying to teach you right now? But then I tell them, no, I handed you a Rubik's Cube that's maybe 3 or 4 turns from being solved, and I want you to solve that. Or something that is like a much lighter degree of toughness. Like, we start simple, we help them out, and I'm right there to tell you, oh yeah, like, turn it this way, turn it that way. Okay, so and then I'll start to up the degree of toughness as your understanding grows. And so there's a learning pyramid that's taught in the school. And I think I'm not really going to go into that, because I think you need to go to the school to learn about this. But it's basically, how do we get to that point where the dog understands without any stimulus to do every single time? And there is a process. And it's also not just the process of helping the dog, reading the dog, understanding the dog, but also how do there is a point where we actually like a little bit of that disobedience of like, no, I want this more than I want that from you. And we structure it so the thing that they want more is the behavior that we're trying to train.
Manipulating motivation. And
that's right. Where the dog, it thinks it's a democracy, but it's really, we have it all figured out. We are in control of the situation, where the dog truly thinks it's their idea.
And you mentioned the e-collar a little bit earlier. That is something that I believe is often misunderstood by a good majority of the public.
Yes.
And that is involved in this system, I believe. Can you elaborate a little bit on the remote training collar, the e-collar, maybe some of the misconceptions that people have, and how, when used the right way, it could enhance our communication and, in fact, strengthen the relationship and obedience and reduce behavioral issues?
Absolutely. I compare the e-collar to the cell phone for people, right? It's something that we utilize for more effective communication. And I could just use a regular cell phone, but I choose to have the best iPhone. And so not only do they teach the e-collar use, but they also provide the best e-collar in the world. And it's a chameleon collar that they have. And the beautiful thing about the chameleon collar, that it has a patented where you actually see when it's called contact measurement, where you actually see when a contact is being made. And so we know that we are speaking to that dog using this e-collar. And a lot of times people use inferior products, or they use a e-collar where they don't have proper connection. They don't know how to use it. They use it as a hammer, right, where they're trying to punish a behavior. Or they use these collars that you buy on Amazon for $40 or whatever. I won't touch those collars.
Mm.
And so the Martin system is the name of the company that produces the Chameleon 3, the Chameleon 4, and they have the contact measurement. They have a totally different shape of the collar, where instead of just a box with two prongs, it's actually it's like a monkey holding onto a tree, where it actually wraps around the dog's neck, and you don't need to ratchet it down. The Chameleon 4 it's one of the things that they teach is all about animal welfare in this system. That's another thing. Another thing that I absolutely love is that they always keeping animal welfare laws in perspective, right? This company is from Belgium. They have a lot different laws than we do here in America. And so they have a totally different priority as far as addressing the animal's needs. And what happens when we don't have that contact measurement that I've seen is that the contact isn't being made, and people are ratcheting up that collar to a high degree. And what happens is the collar arcs, or it finally makes contact. It's at a very high stimulus, and it overstimulates. It provides a painful shock to that dog, and that's not what I'm talking about here.
I've seen that lots of times. Yep.
I'm sure, as far as professionals are concerned. And so that is one of the things that drove me to the system. I saw the collar at a trade show, and I was like, man, this is a game changer. If I can tell when the contact is being made, I have trust. I know that I'm speaking to the dog effectively, right? And not having to bring it up to a level that's uncomfortable for the dog. Now, not saying that is never used. Like if a dog's running into the road or something like that could jeopardize their life, I absolutely want to have a meaningful lesson for that dog that is going to be safe for that animal. And it's also, if you need to inflict pain to save another animal, if you need to inflict pain to save another human being, or even save that dog's life, I think that not only is it's mandatory, you must do that, because I rather correct the dog for running into the street than that truck correct that dog. I'd rather correct my dog before he bites another person, hurts another dog, because the correction that I provide is going to be much, much more intense and much more harmless than if that dog were to get corrected by that truck or bite and hurt another person or another dog. And so that's important to understand as far as the higher use of the e-collar. But we use the e-collar as a form of negative reinforcement, where we can show the dog is a cue to do and to keep going. There's so many different avenues of of the e-collar use. And there's other tools that they use, the dopamine box, Skinner box, like I was mentioning, the treat and train. It's a whole system, man. And when I first went through the system, Bart said that it's going to take you 5 years to realize and to really get this system. And I realized that I've done it longer than 5 years now. And I think that it's just you're always understanding. And as I've gone through the school more and more, I learn more. And as we have developed a network of dog trainers, we learn a lot more ways that we can implement these tools to bring about a better understanding of how they work, but also better performance from that animal, a better relationship with the human being. And the one thing that I love about the chameleon collars is that they're always innovating. I have one out in my barn here where the chameleon 4 actually on the remote now, it shows you if the contact is being made, battery levels, it shows you the temperature, everything is on the remote there. And then they have a finger kick. I thought I had a finger kick right here, but I don't. Do I? No, they have a finger kick. And so that's the other thing that I loved is like you're not reaching for a remote. You have a finger kick. You're always connected with very minimal effort. And so the dog learns based on their own behavior, not on watching you reach for that remote, pulling that remote or whatever. I just think that it's the top of the line, the most effective way. But it is a premium price. And the beautiful thing about it too is like every component can be paired, repaired. There's so many different settings that you can utilize with this stuff, with the chameleon collar. So it's not just the system, but it's also a bunch of tools to help you implement the system more effectively, more efficiently.
And with the remote collar, I also want to go back to the dopamine box. I'm interested to hear more about that. With the remote training collar, it's one of the ways of looking at a situation. I can't recall the actual term. I think it's reverse thinking or something like that, where we can think about the things that we want to do in order to use a tool or a system the correct way. But often, if we think about how can we ruin it and then avoid those things. For example, with the remote training collar, if I wanted to create issues with the dog and the remote collar, what would be things that I would do? I would shock the dog at a high level. I would not teach the dog what the shock means. I would show the dog the remote. What are some of the things that you could think of? Because this will help people to avoid certain things. And sometimes avoiding certain things can be a good way to build the habits to do the right things.
I mean, I always tell my people, slow is fast, less is more, right? Where we want to take the time to introduce this. We want to take the time to allow the dog to grasp what we're trying to teach them. And I think people are always trying to move quickly. And it's 28 to 45 days to start to develop a habit. And once that habit, we start to keep it up. And consistency, timing, like we were talking about earlier, sometimes the timing it takes a lot of coordination, man. Like, and people don't realize it. It's like learning a dance. That's what I tell people too. Is like, this is like going to a dance class. You kind of have to be willing to suck at it first, but as you keep it up and endure. And I also explain, like, look, there's a gap of learning, right? We're right here. We want to be over here. And then right in the middle here is that messy middle sometimes where we can endure some misunderstandings, some mistakes, not just with the e-collar use, but with the clicker, with the timing of rewards, the timing of corrections, when the behavior is exhibited again, once it's been dormant for a while. All that stuff is important to understand. And that's another reason why it's important to work with a professional, somebody that can, guide you on this journey. And not only that, but also, just find the people that are achieving what you want. Right. And knowing too, like there's some of this stuff is genetics. Like some of this stuff, is, just a totally different approach. Like we were saying, like if the dog's just happy-go-lucky, push-button dog, then that might be a dog that we primarily use a lot of purely positive stuff on, right? But if we have a dog that's high drive, high maintenance, then we have a lot of tools at our disposal to shape and to reward that animal in a meaningful way for that dog.
And to also give these dogs freedom. I've been talking about remote training collars more recently on my channel, which I didn't do for a long time. And one of the main reasons why is because of the negative consequences that could be a byproduct of doing something the wrong way. And just like you said, if you're not a professional, either learn from professionals, do a course, make sure you're doing it the right way, practice on another human, get your timing down, because you'll read articles or you'll see videos where people will claim that dogs trained on remote collars, they look fearful, they look worried, they look really stressed out. And that's just the poor use of any sort of training system.
Yes.
And when we do it the right way, one of the reasons why I'm such a big advocate is it gives my dogs a significantly greater quality of life. I do what I call exploration walks with my dogs every day, where I go out with them and they get to run around and they get to smell things and they get to be dogs and be part of the environment, which has been proven to lower our dog's cortisol levels and help create a balanced dog. And I wouldn't be able to do that, at least not as a responsible dog owner, without these additional tools that can get us to that point of having off-leash freedom. Unless you own a farm and you have a really big fenced-in area, the way that we can do it in a safe way, these tools help us do that, and they help us get to that point. And in fact, my dogs get so excited when I pull out the remote training collar that for a little while I was trying to uncondition them, because they had become classically conditioned to seeing the remote collar as a step towards doing something they really like, whether it's an exploration or we're going out to play tug or we're doing a little bit of fetch or some obedience. It was the precursor to that. And my German Shepherd Maverick, he gets so excited that he starts to bark out of excitement and enthusiasm, and he has a lot of energy. And so he's jumping around through excitement and trying to battle that excitement, because it's a classically conditioned response at this point. It's a losing uphill battle. And so I unconditioned him to it, where I started to bring the collar out and I wouldn't do anything with it, so
Yeah.
he wouldn't have that excited response. And I was able to bring it down, but then I got lazy with it and he got conditioned again. And now I'm just like, well, that's how he is. He gets really excited and really happy when he sees the collar. But I'm pointing that out because when we do it the right way, it does unlock so many opportunities and so much more freedom and a significantly higher quality of life, in my opinion, by doing it the right way and getting those results. And that's why I asked the question about a huge percentage of the population. They have a misunderstanding of what the remote collar is. And I said it in one of my recent, I think I may have said it when I was talking to Larry. I had my dogs at a park and someone saw the remote collar and they looked at me and they said, "Oh, you use that. I train my dogs the real way." And then I told my dog to do a bunch of stuff and she did it really quickly. And he's like, "Oh, you're a dog trainer, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah. Do you think that these tools actually can teach the dog to spin, sit, lay down?" It is an additional tool to communicate. And when done the right way, it could greatly enhance the relationship and quality of the dog's life.
Yep. Amen, man. And that's what it is, and it brings about a certainty of off leash reliability. And that's one of my favorite quotes: is the mark of a trained dog is off leash reliability. And even if you do have a farm, dude, I have a farm here, but I take my dogs on adventures all the time because they're trained, and it's something that's fulfilling to them. And even if you look at Michael and Bart Bellin, man, they like, look at their dogs. They're amazing. And then they take them. I think Michael took her dog to an eye appointment, or something where they're, or Bass Pro Shop there, where the dog's walking up or on the riding the escalator and stuff like that. So brings about more freedom. It brings about more trust with you, that now you can trust your dog because the lines of communication are open. The relationship is based in understanding. And that, to me, is why we got these dogs, man,
Mhm.
is to be fulfilled. But we've got to make sure that both sides of the equation are fulfilled. And the e-collar, like it's not mandatory for me. Like
Mhm.
it's something that I can train a dog without an e-collar. And we talk about, there are 1,000 ways to roam, 1,000 roads to roam. But you have to understand the advantages and disadvantages of using the e-collar, how to deal with an e-collar that has what we call scarred the dog. The dog has scars where
Mhm.
not literally like physical scars, you guys, but like has scarred the demeanor of that animal where they shake, their head down. Like, how do we fix that as
Mhm.
professional trainers, right? It might be that the product is inferior. We need to get a new product, but a lot of times it's just like Nate was saying, we counter condition that. And now we have a way of starting a new conversation by utilizing the collar as one of the key points that we're going to be talking about with that dog. And there's a number of different ways. Like if we charge that clicker and we get the dog to interact operantly with different things, and then the dog starts to get rewarded, I might bring out that collar and let the dog interact with that collar. Oh, I got rewarded. Oh, I got rewarded by interacting with this. Now let me put it on you. Click, click, take it off, reward, right? And so we have a way of having a different conversation where we can counter condition. What did you call it?
Reverse thinking. I don't know if that's
Reverse.
the actual term
Well,
for
that
it.
makes sense, right? Because now
Yeah.
we're reversing this thinking back to something that is more desirable. And that's what I've done is like, I'll give my clients homework, like, I want you to take a video of just you, go grab the collar, whether it be the training collar or the e-collar or whatever. And then I want you to immediately point the camera at your dog, right?
Mhm.
And what you see, if done correctly, as soon as you grab that collar, that dog comes alive, tail up, wagging. Here, let's go. Let's go on the adventure. Same thing that you see if you go grab your car keys and your dog's leash, right? That should be for every tool that you use for your dog. Is like, oh, cool, man, we're out. We're doing this. We're excited. Now, that excitement can get overwhelming, and once it becomes it becomes too much, then maybe we'll go grab the leash, the car keys, and then go sit on the couch and
Right. Yeah.
read a book, right? Or another thing that I'll do is I'll just let the dog wear the collar,
Mhm.
maybe throw the ball from, but not use it at all, right? And the people, they just move too quickly with it. They move too quickly, but also they don't give that dog a proper understanding that this actually is a good thing. This is me talking to you. And sometimes it's a tap on the shoulder when my voice doesn't work. Sometimes it's just another stimulus when I don't want to use my voice. Um, and sometimes it's what we call a hand of God saying, like, dude, do not run into that road. Do not. It's just like electric fences on a pasture. Right, there's my thumb again. I've seen horses where they actually will go down through and eat grass on the other side of that fence, and they know exactly where that fence is because it's been conditioned.
Mhm.
And maybe they've received a couple negative or pretty solid punishments from doing it wrong, but they learn. And learning, there is a degree of difficulty. There's a degree of discomfort when we start to learn new things. And just like we want to become the dog, and that's what I love about these role playing classes is like, for instance, I'll be like, okay, who's the dog? The student will figure out who the dog is, and then we have them leave. We have them leave the room, and then everybody who's in there, I speak kind of quietly so the dog can't hear us on the outside of the room, doesn't get any hints. It's like, okay, what do we want to do with this dog? And we want to get him to grab the ball on the table and go put it on the I don't know, the whiteboard or whatever or touch the corner of the whiteboard.
And you're talking about the person who's going to act as the dog, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so then we utilize the clicker and the e-collar. And keep in mind, man, I wear the e-collar. I hold it in my hand, or I'll put it on my arm or something like that. There's nothing that I won't put on my dog that I haven't felt first. Right.
Me
And
too.
so, yeah, same. I think it's fair, man. Like every tool, even I don't use prongs too much, but I do use them. I'll put it on my leg. I'll put it on my client's leg. I'll pull it. I'll chug it. Like I want them to understand the last thing in the world I want to do is hurt your dog. That's the last thing I want to do ever. That break my heart, man, if I was hurting dogs.
Well,
And
yeah,
so
and I mean, we got into this, and everyone who has a dog should have a dog because we want to give our dogs the absolute best quality of life that we can provide, and we can improve the quality of our dog's life by continuing this journey of education within the dog world and learning how we can become better dog owners. Because my overall goal, and I know yours is I want each dog that I come in contact with to be able to improve their life by teaching their owners certain things. And I want my dogs, like, I don't want to hear about someone bragging that they have a working dog, but their dog sits in a kennel 23 hours out of the day. No, I want my dogs to have the greatest possible life. And I feel like it's my responsibility as a dog owner to provide that for them, because I wouldn't want the alternative reality to be that if they were picked up by someone else, that they would have a much better life, where I'm giving them a lower quality life because I'm not taking it as seriously as I should. And I prevented them from living a better quality of life if someone else had got them instead of me. And
yeah.
that kind of eats at me. So I always want to make sure, how much can we improve our dogs' lives? And if I need to give a dog one correction for stepping into the street to prevent that dog from getting hit by a car, as you said, I'm most certainly willing to do that, because if we're looking at the big picture is to give them a good, long, happy, healthy life, which brings me to the dopamine box. I've heard about it. I've seen people use it. I don't fully understand it. Can you break down what that is and how it's implemented within a training system?
Yeah, it's a little. Well, let me go back to what you were just saying, and then I'll write down dopamine box so I can stay. We like we were talking about earlier, higher consciousness beings. We're it is our moral obligation to be stewards of these animals. And we got to
Mhm.
remember too that we're bringing a dog into the human world. And there's a lot of contraptions that the humans have that might evoke a fear response, that might entice a dog to chase, and that are actually dangerous for that animal. And so it is our professional obligation as trainers, but furthermore, it's our moral obligation as human beings to understand and to bring about fulfillment in this dog, that is, not just to our dog, but to dogs worldwide. And that's why I've traded my life to do this. And when you understand that, and that we are stewards, um, that's why I like to talk about this stuff. That's why I'm such a fan of NePoPo. That's why I'm such a fan of other training methodologies, that teach us how to better understand and to actually achieve the results that we're looking for.
And it's
So
the same thing with kids. It's like I
totally,
have a little toddler and I have another one on the way. And it was probably about 6 months ago, my little toddler goes running towards the electrical outlet, and somehow she had a fork in her hand. We were packing everything up. We were getting ready to move. So maybe it was like 4 months ago. And I'm telling her, no, no, no. And I had to run and grab her and pull her away. And it did scare her for a moment, because I haven't ran at her and grabbed her and pulled her from something before. But she was so close to sticking that into the electrical outlet. And I had to
goodness.
sit her down and talk to her about it. Like, this is very important. It's my responsibility to keep you safe. And I most certainly don't want my child to get electrocuted because I wasn't paying attention or I didn't prevent or stop it. So we're really doing things for the overall safety and well-being. And again, it's the same thing with kids. People that have little kids, you should, in a sense, look at your dog in the same way, not being anthropomorphic, but being very concerned about their overall welfare.
Yes. Yeah. Being a good steward, being a good father, it's something that this is a sentient being. Their wants and desires are to that individual dog are just as important as your wants and desires are to you, as your daughter's wants and desires are to her, as all of our wants and desires are. And we have to view them as sentient beings, and tailor our training approach to fulfill the desires that are present within that individual animal.
Mhm.
Okay.
And everything that they get, we provide. So, all the experiences are, they can't go out on their own. Hey, I'll be back in a little bit. I'm going to go hang out with my dog friends. They
Yeah.
don't get to do that.
Well, or they can't, like you were saying, I sat down my daughter and talked to her about what's going on here. Like I can't be my dog, bring my dog home and be like, dude, at that farmer's market, you were losing your mind. Let's talk. Why were you doing that? Like the way that they think, we have to address the behavior in the moment. And actually, I tell people like when the behavior's exhibited, even if it's an undesirable behavior, it's a good thing because now we have that opportunity, that moment to address that behavior and show the dog, is this something that I want to continue or is this something that I want to stop right now?
Mhm.
Okay.
Definitely good learning opportunity. All
Yep.
right, so let's transition to the dopamine box. I'm
Dopamine.
curious.
Yeah, dopamine box is really cool. And I didn't know anything about the dopamine box before the NePoPo school. And I love it, man. I mean, I utilize it and it's basically a tool that we can use to build about a little bit of toughness for that dog. So first and foremost, whenever we have a dopamine box, we're not going to keep it out. We're going to put it up and away and hide it. So just like the tool, when we bring out this with this dopamine box, I want that dog to be like, "Oh, it's party time."
And what
Right?
does it look like for those listening?
It's a wooden box. Here, let me see if I mean, I can pull up maybe an image. So the wooden box, usually it's for the bigger dogs, it's 12 by 12 by 12, and then we have a larger base on the bottom. The top is open. And for my little dog, so the larger dogs is 12 by 12, but then I make them 8 by 8. Here's one of my girls. She's sleeping right here on the chair underneath me here. She's always with me on any live stream or any interview that I do. Um, and then we leave the top open. Here, let me see if I can find one for you. And what we do is we show the dog the box and we throw food in the box or we put food in the box. Or what I'll do too, Kingdom Canine, let me see who. Oh yeah, these are nice. So here's Kingdom Canine. I don't know these people, but they out of a good little box here. So let's show this is what it looks like. Share screen. So here's Kingdom Canine. And so this one looks, it's a puppy dopamine box. So this one is, and they have so many different attachments. This one's really good quality, man. I mean, this is $120, but this is a training tool that you'll use a lot. Okay. So we hide the dopamine box. I'll throw food. Can you see if you see my arrow, I drop food into the box. I see, what I'll do is I'll have the dog on a back tie or something like that. I like to use a harness on the dopamine box, you guys. So it's not like we always poo-poo harnesses. Like we use it for training. It's just the purpose that we're asking for that dog. Okay. So I use the harness. I back tie the dog. I put the treats in the dopamine box. I let the dog see it. And the dog's just like, oh yeah, man. And then I let the dog on a leash and I let the dog pull me to that dopamine box. Right. So the dog's pulling. I'm letting the dog experience some of the discomfort of having the tension on the line. And then once the dog hits that dopamine box, all slack goes away. And so boom, we got negative, which is a release of the slack. Positive, he's at the box, he's getting the food, and then I drop in kibble. And so, but what I'm looking for is the dog's eating, and I'll drop the kibble over on this corner. So now we're teaching the dog to utilize their nose to start to find the new kibble. And I'm draining the kibble, raining the kibble, raining the kibble. And as soon as that dog's head comes out of that box, boom, we're done. And so I'll take the dog and either put him up or start the exercise again. But so the dog realizes, oh, as long as I keep my head in this box, I'm going to have it rain down on me. I keep on having this drip of positive reinforcement that's coming to me. We utilize this box for so many different things. Initially, the box is for scent work, right? So we'll start to take the bottoms out of the box, and then I start to teach the dog about ground disturbancy. So I'll scratch up the ground, and then I'll put the box on the ground. I'll have the dog pulled to that box, and then same thing, I'll drop the food in. Then I'll do it on different textures, the grass, the dirt, the gravel, all this stuff. And then I want the dog to realize, ooh, I want not only the box, but I want it to be where the ground has been disturbed. And when I say ground disturbancy, I'll just take my feet and scratch up that ground right there. Then I take a flexi pull, which is like a 360 back tie that the dog has full movement. And then I have multiple of these boxes. And so I set it up like a clock face. And then one of the boxes I'll have ground disturbancy. and then I'll put the food in there. So the dog starts to sniff around the box, finds the one with ground disturbance, boom, nose to the ground, right? And the reason we teach the ground disturbances is for IGP or tracking, or when you're tracking a subject, or for law enforcement, the people are running on the ground, they're disturbing that ground. So now the dog can start to follow that track. And then we start to introduce an article. The dog sniffs the article, and then we start to be able to click the dog out of the box. And so now the dog sniffs the box that's been disturbed, puts their nose on the article. Now we can click and reward the dog. And so it's a transition. But what people have done in the system is that they'll take the dopamine box and they'll put a dog, and they'll teach the dog the dopamine box, and the dog is super reactive with other dogs. And so now the dog learns, without any dogs or anything present, in a neutral environment, that this box is amazing, that as long as they keep their head in the box, then we're going to keep on reining. And I'll pull on the tail. I'll like scratch up the dog and then keep on reining it. So the dog realizes, ooh, even though I feel this stimulus, I'll pound on the box a little bit, keep on reining it. And so the dog starts to get a little bit tougher, right? Starts to experience these different incremental changes that might bring about a little discomfort, but then they get paid. And so they realize, oh, as long as I endure, as long as I'm cool with a little knock on the box, a little pull on my tail, a little scratch or a little scruff, I'm still fighting to get in that box, right? Then I'll bring a dog that might be dog reactive, and as soon as his head's in the box, I might bring about another dog in the area. Dog stays in the box, dog's right there, right? And so we start to desensitize, bringing about a behavior that is much more rewarding for that dog than reacting on that other animal. And dude, it's so cool, man. You can see people using these dopamine boxes at vet offices where dogs have been really reluctant. I get it, man. I hate shots, dude. But they need their vaccines and stuff, and people put their dopamine boxes out, and the dog will receive the vaccine without budging, without flinching one bit. And so it's not just a tool, but how to utilize the tool to help the dog through situations that before might have invoked a really fearful response or aggressive or whatever it is, but it teaches them, the behavior itself of getting in that box and keeping your head down is actually the reward. And I'll even put the clack clack whatever. We won't even talk about the clack clack. You'll learn about that in NePoPo school, you guys. So there's so much more.
It sounds like this is a tool that people often use to increase confidence, to work on issues that might be based on fear. And it sounds like it's adding another constant within the dog, meaning every time we take the dog somewhere, the constant could be us. It could be the leash. It could be the collar. It could be the vest if we have on a training vest. These are things that the dog sees as a constant, which can make them more comfortable. But then by adding something that the dog has a strong positive association, which it seems like primarily the teaching is the negative reinforcement, as you said, pulling to the box, and then positive reinforcement as the dog is in the box, and then negative punishment if the dog takes their head out. Well, no more box.
Yep.
So then the dog quickly figures out, okay, I can keep getting this really awesome stuff, creating a strong positive association, and then being able to take that tool and use it in situations where the dog may not be as confident, to help us navigate through, as you said, leash reactivity. I like the example of the vet's office. So you're saying that the vet will come out to give the dog its vaccine or whatever, and they'll have the dog's head in the dopamine box, and they can get the vaccines and they won't even react because they built up that tolerance that keeping their head in the box is a good, and they're going to continue to get rewarded. So ignoring some of the outside distractions is relevant through the training. And so they might ignore the shots as well.
Yeah. I mean, well, they'll I want to see if I can find somebody that has done this so I can utilize it. And keep in mind too, man, like we use these boxes, but you can use a little bucket. You can use anything. Just get that dog's head in there. And it's almost like putting blinders on a horse, I guess.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, man. But it's like, it's really for, to get the dog focused on something that we can help to generalize and to, oh, here we go. Oh, right here, man. Here's a perfect. And they're actually holding this dog down, but I mean, they're not really holding it, but here, let me I'll share this. I don't know who this is, but I'll just kind of put this where. So, and this is a little dog too, and this is a little bit bigger box. But let me just share this so I can give people a bit of a understanding of what. Oh, this is Abby too. This is a friend of mine. So right here, dog's in the box. Now she puts her hand, but the dog's used to that hand. Now look in the back. See the vet? Let's just give that shot.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, that's what I was visualizing.
Right. And so now the dog is realizing that any touch on his body, and he's keeping, and the other person is feeding. And I would actually, the person with the blue watch, I might put, other food in the corners or whatever. But this is how it can be utilized. And there is a function to this, as far as like, this is meant for tracking. This is meant to let the dog start to find an article, and what to do when they get to an article. And so there is a purpose for this. It's not just for the desensitizing the dog to other dogs, vaccines, whatever it may be, loud noises. There's so many different ways, and that's what's beautiful about the NePoPo system, is that once you understand it, you kind of apply it to your business, your way, and that's a beautiful thing that I like. Is I'm a big freedom loving guy myself. Just like I like my dogs to be free, I like to be free as well. So
it seems like one of those tools that definitely can be used in a wide variety of ways. And before we end today's interview, I would like to quickly mention that you have a channel, Bow Wow Bill, where you've talked to countless dog trainers throughout the training world in all kinds of different professions. And I think that's a really great resource. So those of my followers that are listening, if they haven't checked out your channel, they definitely need to do that, because of all the valuable content that you provide and your very deep understanding of dog training. Because as we said at the very beginning, is, we're obsessed. We continue to learn. We continue to grow. And I believe you've been doing this longer than I have, if I'm not mistaken. So you have a plethora of knowledge and information. So what are some of the best ways they can find you? I will be putting the information in the description of the video as well, that they can go down and click on. But what are some of the best ways to reach out to you, to find you on social media, and to reach out and contact you if they need help with their dogs?
I'm on X. I'm on Facebook at Bow Wow Bills. Either it's singular or plural. I think I have both of them. And on YouTube at Bow Wow Bills. And that's probably the best way. I mean, bowwowbill.com, my website. That might be helpful too. But it's, and I'm in the Pacific Northwest, but I also offer Zoom trainings all around the country. I've actually flown all over the country helping my clients with their dogs. I do have a Patreon page where I actually have an interview with Nate on there. And, I appreciate you, brother. And I also want to shout out and do a quick screen share of NePoPo.com, you guys, just so if you're interested, check out their website, NePoPotraining.com. And they do have an online silver school, as you guys can see here. And they have a little video that you can watch there. It's been very helpful to me to learn the system. The system is legit. And Martin system, here's those e-collars as well. So you can find everything you need to know about attending a school or the online school if you can't make it in person. And then also taking your understanding further and looking at the gold multiplicators that you can take you up to the gold level if you're interested in doing that as well. But dude, I appreciate you, man. Like, you and I will have conversations just like this on the phone. So
yeah, cool for hours.
To videotape it. And I've never met you in person, man. That's what's cool too, is that a lot of this technology allows us to connect and to share our passion and solutions that we have with each other, and network. And remember, your network is your net worth, right? And so have a strong network, get out there, mingle, cooperation. Like we have a lot of competition in the dog world, but we need more cooperation. And at the end of the day, just like Nate was saying, we're in it for the betterment of these animals. So thank you, brother.
Thanks again, Bill.
Yeah, my pleasure. Bye, everybody. Join us next week for the live stream. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. And as always, better understanding leads to better behavior. Keep learning, keep leading, and we'll see you next time.